Welcome to Intentionality with me, Paul Kempf, where we explore the possibilities and opportunities that can be created by a more intentional life. If you like what you hear, if you find value in the content and feel moved to do so, please hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode again. If you love this podcast and or believe that there's something that can make a difference in the life of someone you care about, someone you know, please share it with them. Share it with the world so that we can reach more lives and make and impact more lives. This is episode 4. I'm reading a book at the moment called That Will Never Work by Mark Randolph, one of the founders of Netflix. Mark started Netflix in the 1990s with Reed Hastings, who's also written a book about Netflix called No Rules Rules. Maybe a topic for a future episode. 2 things about this book that I want to share with you quickly before we get into the content of today's podcast. First, I'm reading it on Booked, an amazing app, a startup company where you not only read the book, but you also engage with other people on the book. This is an open invitation to anybody from Booked who would like to come onto this podcast in a later episode to talk about the power of books and how books can help you to live a more intentional life. Secondly, this morning I read about having something in your life that keeps you sane, that helps prevent burnout, that helps you to relax, to get away from the stress and anxiety of work, of life. To me, there are a couple of things I'm lucky enough to have in my life that helps me to keep that balance. One of them is my regular Saturday morning golf game with my friends, the Golf Nuts at Waterkloof. Another one is movies. And today, I'm going to tell you more about one of my all-time favorite movies and how the incredibly inspiring message from this movie helps me to live a more intentional life. But first, let's continue our discussion started in our episode last week about debt. I promised in episode 3 we will talk about the difference between good debt and bad debt. And that is also the life lesson about money that I have learned that I'm going to share with you today. Life lesson number 4 in episode number 4. And that is, there is a difference between good debt and bad debt. Right. Good debt does actually exist, but it is still very, very dangerous. Let's first talk about what is a good type of debt. And here, interestingly enough, is also the secret to how to build up a good credit record by making debt without getting entangled in the bad or evil debts that I spoke about in the previous episode. These are things like clothing accounts. A lot of clothing stores would give you 6 months to pay off clothing interest-free. So you're not paying more. There's no additional cost to buying the clothing on an account. It creates a credit record for you. But very importantly, it only works if it doesn't cause you to buy clothes that you cannot afford. Another example is cell phone contracts. A lot of people buy cell phones on a contract. That is actually a form of debt. You are buying an expensive cell phone that you will pay off over time on a contract. As long as you keep to the monthly installments, this is an excellent way of building a good credit record. In fact, anything you pay off over time, anything you commit to paying on a regular basis, not just debt, could be a way to build a good credit record. Honoring your debit orders every month, paying your rent on time every month, are all good ways of building a good credit record. Good debt is also any debt that you make to buy an asset that could make you money over the long term or save you money over the long term. Example of these are buying a property, buying a business, buying shares, and a study loan. Now, let me just qualify something right from the start. When I talk about good debt, I've said to you already that it can be very dangerous as well. And one of the most important things you need to do to prevent good debt from becoming dangerous is to make sure that whatever you are buying, that you can afford it. And there it's very important to understand the true cost of ownership first, and secondly, to provide for the unforeseen. Now, as an example of these 2 points, understanding the true cost of ownership and providing for the unforeseen, let's take a look at a common example. Making debt to buy property. When you buy a property, you buy it for a certain price. You commit to paying that price. But what about things like agent's commission, transfer duties, bond fees, attorney's fees, cost of moving, cost of renovations, maintenance, levies, municipal accounts, capital gains tax? These are all things you need to take into account to know the true cost of ownership of that asset. And what happens if interest rates all of a sudden increases? Like we're all too painfully aware of over the last 2 years. What if electricity costs, water costs increase by a higher percentage than inflation? Can you still afford that asset? Can you still afford that property? Because the moment you get into a position where you cannot afford it anymore, good debt becomes dangerous. The moment you start missing debt or loan repayments, because that's when things like penalties, additional interest, administration costs for collecting debt, ITC blacklisting, repossession, all of these things start happening, and you could potentially lose everything you have. So, is property, is shares a good investment? Of course it is. Is it a good idea to make debt to make these type of investments? I'm not so certain. What about starting or buying a business? Do yourself a favor and just walk around a mall in South Africa over the weekend and see the number of empty shops. Remember, these are all businesses that have closed. People that have lost their savings and investments. People that have made debt to be able to open these businesses. Debt that could not be repaid and that probably led to the financial ruin of someone somewhere. So you really need to make very careful, very well-informed choices when it comes to debt. As I said in episode 3, this is a difficult subject, but potentially life-changing if you get control of your debt. But also if you start understanding debt and the role it can play in your life to help you get closer to your goals, closer to a more intentional life. Okay, enough about debt. Let's try and end off on a lighter note today. I've shared with you before that I love movies. I've always loved going to the movies. I love the wild ride of that a good movie can take you on. The inspiration I get from a truly great movie. I love talking about movies. I love movie trivia. I especially love beautiful and inspiring quotes from the movies. Maybe one day I can start a podcast about movies. Maybe I can do it with the producer of this podcast, Karen, who shares my love for the movies. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? Maybe later on we can do an episode about how movies can help you to live a more intentional life. For now, I want to end off this episode by telling you about one of my favorite movies of all time. The quirky, romantic, and deeply moving About Time. A 2013 movie about time travel. Now, before you judge too quickly, yes, it is fantasy, yes, it is unrealistic, and yes, it is a love story. But if you can suspend disbelief, you will undoubtedly discover the secret to finding joy in your life. One of the most important lessons you can ever learn. And at the end of this incredible movie, you will experience the beautiful, heartwarming relationship between a father and son. A scene that makes me miss my dad every time I see it. That inspires me to be a better parent and to try and be the kind of dad Bill Nighy portrays so beautifully in this movie. In About Time, the main character regularly travels back in time to relive his day, to try and do things differently, to engineer a better outcome to his day and to his life. And then at the end, he realizes the powerful life secret, so eloquently summarized in one of my favorite quotes from this movie. I just try to live every day as if I have deliberately come back to this one day, to enjoy it, as if it was the full final day of my extraordinary, ordinary life. We are all traveling through time together, every day of our lives. All we can do is our best to relish this remarkable ride. Intrigued? If you have not seen it yet, I urge you to watch About Time this week. And I dare you not to be moved, not to get emotional, not to want to live a more intentional life, so beautifully portrayed in this gem of a movie. A quick thank you to the FFG Group for their valuable support of this podcast. We are optimistic and hopeful that this podcast will grow over time into something substantial and meaningful, and that this journey together can create lasting memories. Should you want to get hold of me, send me an email. The address is paul@intentionality with paulkempf.co.za, or contact me through the channel that you are listening on. I would love to hear from you. Congratulations on making the choice to live a more intentional life, to be the architect of your own success, and to achieve more in your life. I'm looking forward to sharing the next episode of Intentionality with Paul Kempf with you next week. And may the rest of your week be an amazing, intentional adventure.